Hey there, my name is Adam from Powerbelt 3D, and this video is going to walk you step by step through the unboxing and setup of one of the Tinybelt Beta 3D printers. The Tinybelt is what I hope might become the Ender 3 of conveyor belt 3D printers because I'm so inspired by how conveyor belt 3D printers are fully automated and all of the amazing things and positive impact that low cost, fully automated little manufacturing robots could do for this world. If you haven't heard about it, I will place a link in the description of this video. Like I said, this is a beta printer being shipped out to all sorts of people to get their feedback before launching. And we're getting so close to that point, so I'm very excited. Hope you enjoy. So, when your Tinybelt beta printer shows up at your door, it should look something like this. It'll show up in a box, and some things might change as I ship more and more of these. I might change little things here and there, especially how they are packed, if some printers get broken when they arrive, just to see how, these first few units go. But the idea is to make the experience quick and easy to get up and running. So this is the 90% assembled version of the Tinybelt. Once the printer launches on Kickstarter, I'm hoping to replicate this experience very closely. Again, some things always change in between different phases of product development, but I'm going to do the best I can. So the first thing we're going to do is open up this box. The one that ships you will have more tape on it. I just did a minimal amount for the sake of the video. Because I'm working on a small scale compared to a lot of other 3D printing companies, bubble wrap is really easy to get and effective packing material compared to a lot of the custom cut foam options you might see with other printers. Let's get this top layer out of the way. There are a few things that will be kind of laid on top of the printer. First, this extrusion is going to become our Y-axis. We have our hot end / Y-axis roller assembly, the LCD screen, and Y-axis motor. So from there, we'll just be able to pick this printer up out of the box. And before I go any further, I feel like I have to acknowledge that, yes, it did feel absolutely ridiculous for me to take apart a fully functioning printer that I'm going to hang on to and take it apart and reassemble it exactly the same way. However, I will set those feelings aside for the sake of being able to do this demonstration. Here's our power cable. This is our LCD screen. The Z motor is going to go up here. And the other thing that should have been in this box, but I forgot, is this little bag of parts. So these are our two idler pulley mounts, and then I have a hot end mount, so this is part of this assembly, but beta tester feedback said that they really wanted heat set inserts, especially for this part in particular. So it has a printed part here. I'm not totally sure if you can see it, but on this assembly, the screws just thread right into the plastic. So this is a replacement part that I'm including so that if the hot end mount wears out over time, it can be replaced. So the most complex part of this whole assembly process is going to be our Y-axis, which is also where the hot end is mounted. I tried to make it as simple as I possibly could, so the Y-axis has T-slot nuts on the X carriage. So we can slide this Y-axis extrusion in place. We'll need to do some fine adjusting later, but for now I'll just tighten up these two M5 bolts. And I like to tighten these fairly slowly and alternate back and forth between them. That way the T-slot nuts can self-align into the V-slot profile. This is our GT2 motion belt for the Y-axis. This might get a little lost in the box based on where I had to pack everything, but this can go around our motion pulley for our Y motor and slide our hot end mount down onto the V-slot extrusion. Make sure that the loop on your GT2 belt is up and out of the way so that it doesn't block the bottom wheel from rolling onto the extrusion. Next, we can take one of our idler pulley mounts and slide it in place at the top of our y-axis. Wrap the GT2 motion belt around it and slide it in place on the screw on the back of the hot end roller assembly. Take the other side of the GT2 belt and wrap it around the pulley on the y-axis motor. And as I said, we would have to do some fine adjustment, so this belt isn't actually reaching all the way to the mount screw because of where I positioned the V-slot extrusion. So what I'm going to do is loosen the two M5 bolts at the bottom here, and we can slide the Y-axis down closer to the Y motor. That will help the belt make it all the way up to the bolts on the hot end assembly, and then retighten these two bolts. Next, we can tension the Y-axis belt simply by pushing up on this idler pulley mount and tightening those two bolts in place. That's all there is to it, so now it's moving smoothly. One other thing we'll do while we are focused here is take our Bowden tube and put it in the extruder coupler, making sure to push it all the way down into place. Next, we will attach the idler pulley to the x-axis on the top rail of the extrusion. Loop the GT2 belt around the idler pulley, and also pull the GT2 belt around the drive pulley on the motor side of the axis. There are two screws that attach the extruder and x-axis motor to the frame, so you can loosen those on the T-slot a bit and pull this further to the side of the printer facing me. Also push on the idler pulley mount just like we did with the y-axis to tension the motion belt. We're pretty close to getting up and running, so the next thing you have to do is attach the Z-axis slash conveyor belt axis motor to the frame. Again, it has M5 bolts and T-slot nuts. We're going to slide it in place and then pull the motor in this direction towards the front of the printer frame. While we're doing that, we need to tighten the M5 bolts, and I'd like to start with the one closest to the drive motor. By pulling the motor forward and tightening the M5 bolts, it's actually going to tension the closed loop GT2 belt that will allow us to drive the whole conveyor belt. Next, let's find the LCD screen, and this has drop-in T-slot nuts instead of the slide-in variety. That way we can remove the LCD screen for shipping purposes, and without having to disassemble anything, you can just set it in place. When I'm tightening this type of T-slot nut, one thing I like to do is loosen it a little bit and then turn it to the right really fast. That way the drop-in T-slot nut is more likely to rotate within the channel of the extrusion and actually tighten it onto the frame. The last and final thing we want to do is set our Y end stop height. So, depending on where this extrusion actually ends up in relation to the sheet metal X carriage mount, might affect the height of your nozzle in relationship to the conveyor belt. So, similar to setting your first layer height, we're going to want that to be as perfectly positioned as possible so that we can get a good first extrusion on our prints. So to do that, I'm going to loosen the bolts on the Y end stop mount and slide it down or up, depending on whether your nozzle is too close or too far away from the conveyor belt. Then we can move the hot end assembly down to the end stop, and it looks like we're still probably 10 or so millimeters away from touching the conveyor belt, so we'll just repeat this process. That's looking pretty good. It looks like it's just barely touching, so we will start there to run test prints, and probably fine tune it a little bit as we run those to try to get the best results. Now the printer just needs to be plugged in. I will make sure to link to some demo G codes that you can use. Just load them onto the printer and verify that everything is working the way that it's supposed to. Thank you so much for watching. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, if you want some more information on the launch of the Tinybelt, I will make sure there's a link in the description. I will also leave you with a video on screen somewhere where you can see actual feedback from Steve, one of our beta testers who opted for the box of parts edition of the Tinybelt beta instead of the 90% assembled version. But that should give you a clearer idea on what to expect from this printer when it comes out. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day.